chat. I'm going to send into the chat to everyone our all lost time. I'm seeing the time is 11:45 Eastern, which would make all lost time 2 p.m. And with that, I'll turn it over. I'm going to mute my audio and video.
Great. Hi, everyone. Let's call the case of Stevie Rogers v. Drew Mars. My name is Phil Pasquarello. I think our bailiff went over this a second ago, but our scoring judges should look to the two buttons on the bottom left of your screen and make sure you're muted and your video is off, which I think everyone has done. You also should set your video settings to hide all non-video participants. And the way you'll know you've done that correctly is if the only people you see on the screen right now are me and two other people. You shouldn't see any of the scoring judges, just the competitors. I think we're ready to get going. Can the attorneys please make appearances?
Certainly, Your Honor. My name is Parker Sikora, and myself, alongside my co-counsel, Mr. Jeff Ecker.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
Represent the plaintiff in today's case, Miss Stevie Rogers.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Hi.
And we invite opposing counsel to also make appearances at this time.
With Your Honor's permission.
Of course.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Michael Young, and along with my co-counsel, Chris Alexander.
Good morning, Your Honor.
We represent the defendant in today's case, Ms. Drew Mars.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. Are we ready to go with opening statements?
The plaintiff has a few pretrial matters to attend to, with Your Honor's permission.
Of course.
We just want to ensure that the available documents are accessible to all at the bench, ensure that they're available throughout your use throughout today's trial. Those documents should be in a folder to you, and they include the pretrial order, the complaint and answer, available case law, jury instructions, and the Midlands Rules of Evidence.
I'm familiar with it, and I have access to it if need be.
Thank you, Your Honor. We'd also like to bring to the court's attention at this time, attention to that pretrial document, the pretrial order, the prior evidentiary ruling, specifically that exhibits 1 through 7 are pre-admitted and may be used for any purpose at any time throughout trial today.
Okay. Defense counsel, is that your understanding of that provision of the pretrial order?
That is exactly my understanding, Your Honor.
All right. The only thing that I'd ask is, to the extent that you're going to display something before a jury that's pre-admitted, just let me know that what you're about to display is pre-admitted, and go ahead and display it with that kind of warning before you do. Okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Great.
On that point, we'd like to inquire about your preference in terms of sharing the screen. Would you like us to ask in advance always before doing so?
If it's pre-admitted, just let me know that what you're about to display is pre-admitted, and then you can just display it without my permission. To the extent that it's not pre-admitted, I'd ask that you lay the necessary foundation and then ask to display it at that time.
Yes, Your Honor. And finally, we'd like to enact Rule 615, the effective sequestration of all lay witnesses, barring party representatives. So that would include, in this case, Mr. Bond and Ms. Cabrera, given that the party representatives for the plaintiff is Ms. Stevie Rogers herself.
Counsel, do you have any objection to Mr. Bond and Ms. Cabrera? I hope I got the genders correct. Do you have any objection to their sequestration?
None, Your Honor. I would just like to explicitly point out that Ms. Mars, as the defendant, is our party representative.
Okay.
And at this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to proceed with opening statements.
Okay. First, before we do that, defense counsel, do you have any preliminary matters to go over before we get into opening statements?
Briefly, Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to ask about your preferences for whether or not attorneys should be seated or standing during statements or examinations, or if that's simply at our preference.
It's your preference, whatever's comfortable for you. Obviously, you're going to make strategic choices about what to do physically, and that's a point of advocacy that I'll leave to your discretion.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense has no further pretrial matters and is ready to proceed.
All right. Before we proceed with opening statements, I'll just remind our scoring judges to switch their view to speaker view, and that's the button in the top right corner of your screen. And attorneys, just make sure that when you're not the one speaking, you're muted, because otherwise the speaker view will switch to you if it hears speaking or other noises coming from your microphone. So with that, plaintiff's counsel, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor.
May I proceed?
Yes.
In today's era, there may be no job more important than that of a nurse. And if there's one positive from these past few months, it's that we've highlighted an underappreciation for the thousands of men and women who risk their lives to ensure safety, health, and comfort. You'll learn that for 10 years, renowned author Agatha Lee trusted the defendant, Drew Mars, with her life. The defendant lived with Miss Lee, took care of Miss Lee, and every week the defendant prepared Miss Lee's medication. Miss Lee trusted her nurse so much that she left her entire $20 million estate to the defendant. But then on August 14th, you're going to learn that something changed. After rekindling a relationship with her only granddaughter, Miss Lee decided to change her will. And she was going to leave everything to her family. And when the defendant overheard this conversation, she knew she had to do something. And she saw a window of opportunity. And that night, before Miss Lee could ever change her will, she died. And the defendant stood to inherit everything. And that's why we're here today. Stevie Rogers, Miss Lee's only granddaughter, seeks recognition for the truth of what happened to her grandmother. But today is not a criminal trial, which means your decision, it won't send the defendant to prison. But we're still here for justice. Because according to the law, if you killed somebody and you meant to do it, you're not allowed to inherit anything from their estate. So if we prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence that it is more likely than not the defendant killed Agatha Lee, she won't be allowed to inherit a nickel of Miss Lee's estate. And I'm going to walk you through step by step how we're going to prove that the defendant seized on her window of opportunity. And that window began around noon on August 14th. Now, after hearing that she was being taken out of the will, the defendant knew she was running out of time. So after she dropped Miss Lee off at lunch, you'll learn the defendant went to a pharmacy. Now, being Miss Lee's nurse for 10 years, the defendant had a wealth of knowledge when it came to Miss Lee's medication. And in particular, she knew that Miss Lee was deathly allergic to a drug, chloroandramine. Now, she also knew that chloroandramine felt like, tasted like, and looked exactly like one of the pills that Miss Lee took every night. So Miss Rogers is going to tell you that that night, she saw the defendant sneaking off towards Miss Lee's bedroom. And that's when you're going to learn that the defendant switched the pills and killed Agatha Lee. Now, you're also going to hear from a private investigator, Marcus Bond. Mr. Bond's going to explain that the autopsy report conclusively shows that Agatha Lee died from chloroandramine. And after they searched the defendant's bedroom, they found a bag with chloroandramine inside. And after testing that bag for fingerprints, there was only one match: the defendant's. She was desperate for money, so the defendant seized on a window of opportunity. And when we prove that to you today, we're going to ask that you don't allow Miss Mars to profit off of the same person that she promised to protect. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, do you wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay,
May I-
of course.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Stevie Rogers framed Miss Mars to steal the fortune. Members of the jury, what happened to Agatha Lee is devastating. For the people close to her, that loss must weigh heavily. But throughout today's trial, I want you to key in on that phrase, the people close to her. Because that's where the plaintiff's story starts to go awry. During opening statements, the plaintiffs told you a story. Just like most stories, it held some bits of truth. It's true that Miss Mars had been Agatha Lee's caretaker for over 10 years. It's true that over that time, Miss Mars and Miss Lee developed a special relationship. And it's true that Agatha decided to leave her estate to Miss Mars and not her grandson, Stevie Rogers. That's where the truth in the plaintiff's story runs out. Because when Stevie Rogers got desperate, when his bank account balance ran low, he sunk even lower. What if I were to tell you that as of July 2018, it had been 7 years since Stevie Rogers had seen, visited, or even spoken to his grandmother? What if I were to tell you that his return coincides exactly with his running out of money? And what if I were to tell you that the conversation Miss Rogers claims happened between herself and Agatha Lee actually ended with Miss Lee outright rejecting her begging for the estate? Stevie Rogers framed Miss Mars to steal the fortune. Now, I want to be very clear about what the law requires us to do today. First and foremost, you need to know that the burden of proof rests entirely on the plaintiff's table, and it never shifts to the defense. It's not the defense's responsibility to prove anything throughout today's trial. Now, what the plaintiff has to prove to you by what we call the preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely than not, is that Miss Mars knowingly or purposely caused Miss Lee's death. But as you're going to see today, the plaintiff isn't going to meet their burden. In fact, as the defense, we're going to show you a much more likely explanation. And we'll do that in two ways. First, we're going to show you the inconsistencies in the plaintiff's narrative. Today, the defense is going to be calling two witnesses who will absolutely contradict the change the plaintiff claimed happened. Those witnesses, Miss Mars and Miss Cabrera, will tell you outright that the conversation between Miss Rogers and Miss Lee concerning a change in her will did not happen. So if it didn't happen, why is Miss Rogers saying it? Which brings me to my second point. We're going to show you a much more likely explanation for how Agatha Lee died. Because throughout trial today, we're going to show you that in 2018, Miss Rogers was written out of her grandmother's will. You'll hear that upon her return to her grandmother's estate, she had just run out of money. And you'll hear that she would stop at nothing to secure her next paycheck. Miss Rogers framed Miss Mars to steal the fortune. And that's why at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel Michael Young will ask you to find in favor of the defense. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Before the plaintiff calls its first witness, I'd ask our scoring judges just to switch over to gallery view, which again is in the top right corner of your screen. That way you can kind of see everybody on one screen in equal sizes. Plaintiff, are you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Marcus Bond to the stand. May I proceed?
Yes.
Would you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury and spell your last name for the record?
Good morning. My name is Marcus Bond. That's spelled B-O-N-D.
Where do you currently call home, Mr. Bond?
Right now I'm living in Midland City, Midlands with my wife, but we just moved there a couple of months ago because we both move around for work.
What do you do for work?
I'm a private investigator and consulting detective.
And are you certified as a private investigator?
Yes, sir, I am. I'm certified in 13 states, including here in Midland.
And how long have you been working as a private investigator?
At this point, I've been working for decades. I started out as a police officer, then a detective, and then I moved on to freelancing. Currently, I've been fortunate enough that I get to work on more high-profile cases, murders, kidnappings, that sort of thing.
And in all of your years of work, how many cases would you say you worked on?
At this point, hundreds of cases.
And what brings you to court today?
I was retained by Ms. Stevie Rogers, initially to help locate her grandmother, the deceased Agatha Lee, and later to help in the investigation into her death.
All right, so let's talk about your initial investigation. When did Miss Rogers first hire you?
I was first contacted by Ms. Rogers on June 5th, 2018. She asked me to come down to Monroeville, Alabama.
And did you find Miss Lee in Monroeville, Alabama?
No, sir. That was just to make a determination as to the initial investigation. That was her last place of residence.
Were you able to locate where Miss Lee lived?
Yes, sir. After two days of conducting research, I determined that Ms. Lee had moved to Ryder County, Midlands. I ended up giving Ms. Rogers the address, and she paid me at my standard rate, which amounted to $10,000.
Now, was that your last interaction with Miss Rogers?
No, sir. Ms. Rogers contacted me again on August 15th, 2018, with a frantic phone call.
Do you remember what that phone call was about?
I do. She called me saying that her grandmother had been murdered and asked me to come to Midland straight away.
And did you go to her house?
I did. I happened to be in the area, so I got there within about an hour, and I went straight up to where I was aware Ms. Rogers had told me she was.
Do you know if the police were called?
I do. About 5 minutes after I arrived, a woman, Detective Noura Khan, arrived. She began questioning the other person in the room at the time, Ms. Drew Mars, and then I ended up asking questions of Ms. Rogers.
And what did the two of you speak about?
We spoke about a discussion that Ms. Rogers had had with Agatha Lee the night before her death, specifically discussing a possible financial motive that Drew Mars might have had to kill Agatha Lee.
And did you know what Miss Rogers was talking about?
I did. I learned afterwards, specifically on August 20th, that Agatha Lee had left a sizable estate to Ms. Mars.
And would you recognize a copy of that estate if you were shown one?
Yes, sir, I would.
Your Honor, permission to reveal what's previously been marked as Exhibit 9, but since it hasn't been entered into evidence just yet, may we consider it constructively outside the eyeshot of the jury?
I don't know if you heard me. You can go ahead and do that.
Oh, okay, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Bond, is this that estate you were talking about?
Yes, sir. This is the last will and testament of Agatha Lee. I heard it read aloud on August 20th, and then I saw a physical copy of it that same day.
Does it appear to be changed or altered in any way?
No, sir, it doesn't.
And it appears to be an accurate copy from the one that you saw?
Yes, sir, it does.
Your Honor, at this time, we offer Exhibit 9 into evidence.
Any objection?
Your Honor, pursuant to evidentiary ruling number 18, we have no objections.
Okay.
So, Mr. Bond, under Article 2, disposition of property, could you read that first sentence?
Yes, sir. That sentence reads, I leave my entire estate, including all real and personal property, including future royalties from my book, Death in a Bottle, to my devoted and beloved caretaker, Drew Mars.
Now, do you know how much Miss Lee's estate was worth?
I didn't know an exact number, but through the course of my investigation, I learned that her estate was worth at least tens of millions of dollars.
And Your Honor, at this time, I'll be reading onto the record stipulation number 24.
All right.
At the time of Lee's death, she had no debts and had $19,838,235 in cash. Lee also owned Lee Manor free and clear with an estimated value of $2.1 million. Estimated future royalties for Death in a Bottle are approximately $3 million. Now, Mr. Bond, do you know if Miss Mars was aware that she was the sole inheritor to Miss Lee's fortune?
I am aware that Ms. Mars was in fact aware of this information.
And how do you know this?
Through the course of my investigation, I came across an email that Ms. Mars had sent to someone named Logan, in which she describes this information.
And would you recognize that email?
Yes, sir, I would.
Your Honor, once again, I ask permission to show Exhibit 13, but since it hasn't been entered in evidence outside the eyeshot.
Okay.
Mr. Bond, is this that email?
Yes, sir, it is. Specifically, this is a photograph I took of that email.
And does this photograph accurately relay that email?
It does, sir. It doesn't look like it's been changed at all.
Your Honor, at this time, we offer Exhibit 13 into evidence.
Any objection?
Without objection, Your Honor.
So admitted.
So, Mr. Bond, could you explain how this email indicated that Miss Mars knew about that will?
Specifically, this email states that Drew Mars is aware that Agatha had changed her will to leave everything to her, and that she'd be receiving, quote, millions of dollars. Additionally, it's time-stamped for February 1st, 2018. This was well before the death of Agatha Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. I'd like to move now to the cause of Miss Lee's death. Are you aware of any tests that revealed what that cause was?
I am. After the reading of that will on August 20th, there were 2 tests conducted on August 21st. There was an autopsy and a toxicology screening.
Your Honor, permission to reveal what's already been entered into evidence as Exhibit 2?
Yes.
Now, do you recognize this document, Mr. Bond?
Yes, sir. And this is the autopsy report conducted on Agatha Lee.
And according to this autopsy, what killed Agatha Lee?
According to this autopsy, she died of a fatal allergic reaction to two pills of a substance known as chloroandramine.
And now, did you find any evidence of chloroandramine at Lee Manor?
Yes, sir, I did. Myself and Detective Noor Khan, after receiving this autopsy report and a toxicology screening, went to Lee Manor to conduct a search. During that search, we located a black bag with a bottle of what was later to be determined as chloroandramine.
And would you recognize a photograph of those pills?
Yes, sir, I would.
Your Honor, once again, I ask permission to reveal Exhibit 17.
Go ahead.
Is this that photo you were talking about, Mr. Bond?
This is a photograph of the pill bottle that was found in the closet of Drew Mars. I believe Detective Khan took this photograph.
And is this a accurate photo of that pill bottle?
Yes, sir, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, we offer Exhibit 17 in evidence.
Any
Without
objection? So admitted.
And at this time, we'll also be revealing what's already been entered as Exhibit 3, the toxicology report. Now, Mr. Bond, do you recognize this document?
Yes, sir. This is the toxicology screening that I was mentioning earlier.
And what does this toxicology report conclude?
This report confirms that the pills in that bottle were in fact chloroandramine.
And Mr. Bond, did you find any other evidence linking that bottle of chloroandramine to the defendant?
Yes, sir. While we were within Ms. Mars's room, Detective Khan conducted a fingerprint analysis of the bag and all of the contents of the bag. She found a 16-point match for Drew Mars on the zipper handle of that bag.
And lastly, Mr. Bond, do you know if the defendant ever indicated to you her knowledge about the dangers of chloroandramine?
In fact, she did. On August 15th, after I spoke with Ms. Rogers, I ended up speaking with Ms. Mars. Ms. Mars told me that she was aware of the fact that chloroandramine could be fatal to Agatha Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor, if you could just give me one moment to adjust the video. May I proceed?
Yes.
Mr. Bond, I'd first like to talk about your relationship with the plaintiff, because this case isn't the first time that they've hired you, as you said, correct?
No, they hired me initially to locate their grandmother.
Right, specifically to locate her current living address, correct?
That's correct.
Right, and for that she paid you $10,000, correct?
That's correct, sir, yes.
Right. They've also paid you $10,000 in today's case, correct?
No, sir. For my work in today's case, they paid me $25,000.
Well, they paid you $10,000 and they promised to pay you $25,000, correct?
That's correct, and for my work, I was paid for that.
Right, so when all this is said and done, Ms. Rogers will have paid you a total of $45,000.
$35,000, sir.
Well, $35,000 plus the $10,000 to locate her address, correct?
I'm including that. It was only $10,000 for the address and $25,000 for my work in today's case.
All right, now let's move on to the investigation you did conduct. So you arrived on the morning of August 15th, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right, you arrived before the police.
Approximately 5 minutes prior. That's correct.
Right, and after the police arrived, you spoke to Ms. Rogers, correct?
That's correct.
Right, and she told you about Agatha Lee's will, correct?
That's correct, sir.
But to be clear, Ms. Rogers never indicated that she knew that Miss Mars knew about this will, correct?
No, that was determined afterwards.
Right, but just to be clear, Ms. Rogers did not indicate that fact to you, correct?
That's correct.
Right. Now, speaking of that, well, now, in the course of your investigation, Mr. Bond, you never reviewed Ms. Mars's financial statements, did you?
No, I did not.
Right. So you can't say if Ms. Mars had any outstanding financial circumstances.
I couldn't tell you, sir.
Right. And you didn't review Ms. Rogers' financial statements either.
No, I did not.
Right. So of the two people who were in the house that day, you can't say if either of them had any pressing financial concerns. Isn't that right?
I cannot myself, no.
Right. Now, so next I'd like to talk about your qualifications as an investigator. To be clear, you didn't conduct the autopsy of Miss Lee, correct?
No, sir, I'm not a coroner.
Right. And you didn't do the tox screen because you're not a toxicologist.
No, sir, I'm not.
You didn't formally interrogate any suspects.
No, though I did question Ms. Mars and Ms. Rogers.
Right, but when you questioned them, you didn't record those interviews, did you?
No, I did not.
Right. And when you searched the house, you did so alongside the police, correct?
Yes, sir, I was with Detective Khan during the August 21st search.
Right. Now, I'd like to talk to you about your communication with Detective Khan. So you just mentioned on direct that you took a picture of Ms. Mars's computer, correct?
That's correct. That was on August 15th, though.
Right, you took that picture on August 15th. You didn't tell Detective Khan about that email on August 15th, did you?
No, sir, I informed her of it on August 21st.
Right, you waited 6 days to tell the police about this piece of evidence.
That's correct. That's when I informed Ms. Khan.
Right. Right. In those 6 days, you didn't tell Miss Rogers.
No, sir, I didn't inform anyone until I felt as though the information had been sufficiently corroborated.
And you didn't tell Miss Mars either.
No, sir, I did not.
You never asked Miss Mars about that email, did you?
I did not, no.
Right. Now, just one last point, Mr. Bond. So you talked about a bottle of chlorandramine in the defendant's closet. Just to be clear, there were no detectable fingerprints on that bottle, correct?
No, sir, just on the bag the bottle was located in.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
None, Your Honor.
Okay. Next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, plaintiff calls Miss Stevie Rogers to the stand. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Miss Rogers. Could you please state your name and age for the record?
My name is Stevie Rogers, and I'm 33 years old.
Miss Rogers, what is your relationship to the deceased, Ms. Agatha Lee?
She was my nana on my mom's side. We were very close when I was growing up. We were a bit distant when I was out finding myself, but I appreciate the time I had with her before August 15th.
You mentioned you were close with your grandmother. Could you tell the court a bit more about the rest of your family?
Sure. I'm an only child, which means I spent a lot of time with my parents growing up, and we lived right by my nana. But 2 weeks before my 21st birthday, both of my parents died in a drunk driver incident on the 4th of July weekend.
Sorry for your loss, Miss Rogers. What did you do after you lost your parents?
I needed distance to heal. My nana was so much like my mom that being home reminded me of what I had lost. In 2011, I was struggling in law school and I needed to be elsewhere. So I traveled the world trying to do good, trying to feel good. I volunteered. I played my ukulele in the streets. I met so many people, but traveling alone was also lonely.
Miss Rogers, do you recall where you were in the summer of 2018?
Yes, I had just left my rehabilitation center and I learned that support systems were important. I wanted to go somewhere where I had roots.
So what did you do?
I went to my Nana's home in Midlands. I asked to stay to spend time with someone that was important to me while I was feeling vulnerable. It was coming up on the 10th anniversary of my parents' death, and being with family felt good.
When did you arrive at your grandmother's house?
July 4th, 2018. Like I said, I had just come out of my rehabilitation center, so I had all my belongings and my ukulele with me. When I was with my Nana, it was just like old times.
How do you mean?
Well, we had a lot of catching up to do. We told each other stories. I played her songs. I had learned all these healthy recipes, so I made her breakfast every morning. It was great.
And was it just the two of you staying at Lee Manor?
No, Nana also had a nurse that lived with her, Drew Mars.
Could you describe for the court some of the duties that Drew Mars did as being employed by your grandmother?
Yes, Drew was there.
Lack of personal knowledge.
Explain. Can you explain?
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff's attorney asked the witness to describe Miss Mars's job duty, but within the terms of her employment with Miss Lee, this witness would have no personal knowledge as to the terms of Miss Mars's employment and would only be able to testify as to what she saw Miss Mars do.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe I asked the witness to testify to her observations as it pertained to the duties performed by the defendant within the scope of her employment at Lee Manor.
I think your question was, what were her duties? And so I think that's probably close to the line. So I'm going to allow you to ask the question, but I'm going to ask our witness to limit her testimony to what she observed and to not speculate as to what her job duties may have been that she didn't observe. So overruled with that caveat.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Rogers, to your knowledge, what did the defendant do as part of her duties as your grandmother's caretaker?
Drew primarily took care of my Nana's physical health. A big part of her job was getting the prescribed pills that Nana had to take each week.
Did you ever see the defendant preparing your grandma's pills?
Yes, Nana had a weekly pill organizer, and every Saturday night, Drew would fill the organizer with all the pills Nana had to take. I'm a big fan of crystal healing, but this is what Nana thought was best. So she would take them every night with a glass of water before bed.
Your Honor, permission to display Exhibit 12, the pill case in question.
Okay, is this pre-admitted?
It is not, Your Honor.
Okay, so this will be constructive.
Now, Ms. Rogers, do you recognize this pill case?
Yes, this is Nana's weekly pill organizer.
And is this how it appeared to you in August of 2018?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, plaintiff offers Exhibit 12 into evidence.
Any objection?
Without objection, Your Honor.
So admitted.
Now, Ms. Rogers, between your arrival on July 4th of 2018 and August 15th, 2018, how many people were staying at Lee Manor?
Just me, Nana, and Drew. It was a lot quieter than a lot of the hostels I used to stay at, which was a nice, peaceful change of pace.
Ms. Rogers, I want to direct your attention to August 14th, 2018. How did your day begin?
Well, that morning, I got up and made Nana her favorite breakfast, just black coffee and a grapefruit. I knew all these recipes from around the world, but that's all Nana ever really wanted. And we ate in her study and talked for hours.
What did the two of you talk about?
We talked about how happy we were to be together, and then we talked about the future. Ever since I lost my parents, looking forward was something that only made me think of what I had lost, and it was nice to be with family again and talk about that.
What do you mean by the future, Ms. Rogers?
Nana told me she was glad we had rekindled our relationship. She told me she planned to draw up a new will and leave her entire estate
Your
to
Honor,
me.
hearsay.
Response? Well, actually, before I hear your response, can you make an offer of proof as to what the rest of the statement's going to be, or just tell me what the entire statement is? So that way we're not guessing.
Yes, Your Honor. It's our belief that the witness will testify to the statement by Miss Agatha Lee, the deceased, that she had an intention of drawing up a new will to include Miss Rogers.
Okay. And what is your response to counsel's hearsay objection on that statement?
Yes, Your Honor. We believe that this is a then existing statement of intent, as it is in the moment of the conversation on the morning of August 14th, 2018, the statement of intent or plan by Miss Lee.
Counsel, what's your response to the 8033 argument?
Yes, Your Honor. The actual testimony being elicited does not meet the bars of 8033. Specifically, all we've heard so far is that Miss Lee planned on calling her attorney at some point. That isn't necessarily a statement of intent. Rather, it's Miss Lee talking about something that could happen in the future. It's not her definitively saying that she's going to be doing something.
So hang on a second. I think you guys are disagreeing as to what the actual statement is. What I heard the witness say and what plaintiff's counsel said is that the deceased said that she planned to leave the witness some piece of her estate. Am I correct about that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. I'm going to allow it. I think it meets the threshold of an 8033 statement of plan. So objection overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Miss Rogers, you were saying your grandma was telling you about a plan for the future?
Yes. As I was saying, she told me that she was glad we rekindled our relationship, and she planned to draw up a new will and leave me her entire estate.
Was it just the two of you in the study when that conversation about the new will was taking place?
Yes. However, when we got up to leave for Nana's lunch appointment, Drew Mars was standing right outside the door. It looked to me like she had been listening against it, but I don't know for how long.
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation.
Response?
Your Honor, this witness has just testified to her rationally based perception. She's testified that she opened the door and that she saw Drew Mars standing there, and that it appeared to her that she didn't know how long Drew Mars had been standing there for. All of those observations are well within the rationally based perception of this lay witness to testify.
I'm going to sustain the objection and strike the portion of the testimony where the witness said that it appeared as though Drew Mars was listening. So objection sustained as to that portion of the testimony. Proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
To your knowledge, was Drew Mars within earshot when you opened that door?
Oh, yes. When Nana and I talk, we get a bit loud and excited with each other.
Now, how did the defendant react when you opened the door and saw her standing there?
Mars looked at me, glared, and mouthed, "No way."
Could you describe for the court any physical appearances that you saw from the defendant at this time?
Mars was red in the face. Her eyes were squinted and her fists were clenched. She looked angry. It was intense.
Now, what time did you see the defendant mouth the words, "No way," to you?
This was at 11:30 a.m.
Now, did you see the defendant again that day, Ms. Rogers?
Yes. That afternoon, Nana and I watched a movie, Eat, Pray, Love. We ate dinner together and Nana turned in around 9:30. When I was going downstairs to get my ukulele, I saw Drew tiptoeing toward Nana's room.
Could you see what the defendant was doing as she was walking towards your grandmother's room?
Drew had her hand held up with her palm out and fists closed. It looked to me like she was holding something, but I couldn't see what it was.
Let the record reflect that the witness has raised her right hand with her fingers clenched so as to obscure the contents of her fist. Now, I want to ask, how long was that window of time between the statement by your grandmother that she was going to draw up a new will and the death of your grandmother?
It was less than 24 hours.
So, to your knowledge, do you know if your grandma ever got to meet with her lawyer?
No, she didn't.
Do you know if Agatha ever got to draw up the new will?
She didn't.
So when your grandmother died, do you know who was the recipient of her estate?
Drew Mars.
Now, Miss Rogers, do you know how your grandma died?
Yes. The doctors told me she had a fatal allergic reaction to 2 chloroandramine pills. I said goodnight to my healthy grandmother on August 14th, and the next day I woke up to hear she was dead in her bed.
I want to direct your attention to that drug specifically, chloroandramine. What is it, Miss Rogers?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what it does, but Drew brought it up in a casual conversation once.
Could you tell the court a bit more about the time that Drew Mars told you about chloroandramine?
We were upstairs in Lee Manor talking, and Drew just said, Agatha's allergic to chloroandramine pills. If she takes even one, she'd be dead.
Now, did the defendant ever indicate that she was aware of how to obtain chloroandramine?
Drew told me she knew where to buy it.
And during the investigation, was there ever any chloroandramine found in Lee Manor, Stevie?
Yes. A bottle of chloroandramine pills was found in Drew Mars's closet.
Objection, Your Honor, lack of personal knowledge.
What's your response to that?
Your Honor, this witness has testified that during the investigation, she became aware of the fact that a bottle of chloroandramine was found in Drew Mars's bedroom. Having been involved in the investigation as well as through other trial proceedings, she's become aware of this fact that that evidence was discovered.
Counsel, what's your response to that?
Your Honor, in order for them to testify to that fact, they would need to lay the foundation as to how this witness learned that, whether it came through a conversation with the police or whether this witness with the police and her private investigator during their investigation. We need those facts on the record so that we understand the context as to how this witness knows a detail included in a police investigation.
I agree. Sustained.
Ms. Rogers, were you present at Lee Manor for any searches of the house?
Yes, I was.
Do you know what they found?
Yes. Mr. Bond explained a lot of the investigation to myself, Drew Mars, Detective Khan, as well as Rhianne Cabrera.
Do you know if they found any chloroandramine in your bedroom?
They did not.
Do you know if they found any chloroandramine in Drew Mars's bedroom?
Yes, they did.
Nothing further.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Ms. Rogers.
Good afternoon.
I want to start by clearing something up about the handling of your grandmother's estate, okay?
Sure.
You're aware that your grandmother issued a will prior to 2018, correct?
Yes, that was in 2008 after my parents passed away.
You would recognize that will if I showed it to you today?
It's been a long time since seeing it, but I believe so.
Your Honor, permission to show an exhibit that hasn't been entered into evidence yet. It's the witness, exhibit the witness was just speaking about, Exhibit 8.
Okay. This will be constructively displayed to the witness outside the jury's presence.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Rogers, this is the will your grandmother issued in 2008, correct?
That's right.
It's a fair and accurate copy.
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection to relevancy. May I be heard?
Sure.
We find that this exhibit is more prejudicial than probative, as it is not the last will and testament of Agatha Lee that was executed on August 20th, 2018. Rather, this is a draft of a previous will that was no longer in effect at the time of the death of Agatha Lee.
Okay, counsel, before we talk about the prejudice, first off, why is this relevant?
Your Honor, this is relevant because it supplies the motivation of Stevie Rogers to frame Miss Mars, if I may explain. As you'll see, Your Honor, in Article 2, in the previous will signed by Miss Agatha Lee, Stevie Rogers is named as the beneficiary of Miss Lee's estate. Now, Your Honor, as we'll continue on during this examination, Stevie Rogers was eventually explicitly excluded from benefiting from Miss Lee's estate. And now this is certainly relevant because it supplies a motive for Miss Rogers to cause harm to her grandmother.
Okay, and one last response, plaintiff's counsel, what's the prejudice then?
Your Honor, the probative value that opposing counsel just offered, that Ms. Rogers was specifically excluded from the will, is already entered into evidence without this exhibit, as it's included in the language in the will that was actually executed on August 20th, 2018. To include this will, we believe would just prejudice the jury in the sense that it is not, relevant to the fact. Because it is an old will, there's no relevance to whether it's more or less likely that Miss Mars purposefully caused the death of Agatha Lee.
I think it's relevant to the motive. And so on those grounds, I'm going to overrule your objection. Proceed.
If my co-counsel could end the share stream. Ms. Rogers, I just want to be clear, in that will, you were named as the sole beneficiary of your grandmother's estate, correct?
That's right.
This was in 2008.
Yes.
I want to go through the timeline of what happened between 2008 and 2018, okay?
Sure.
Now, in 2011, you started law school, right?
I was a 2L at that point.
Now, I want to be clear about something. You visited your grandmother in July of 2018, right?
That's right. Like I said, I needed a lot of distance to heal from what happened.
But I just want to be clear for the record, you visited in 2018, right?
That's right.
Specifically in July.
Yes, I showed up on July 4th, 2018, the 10-year anniversary of my parents' death.
In between your leaving for law school and your arrival on July 4th, 2018, you didn't visit your grandmother a single time, correct?
Like I said, I had been traveling across the world, so no, I wasn't in Alabama or Midlands all too often.
Just to be clear, the time between you leaving for law school and 2018 was about 7 years, right?
That's right.
In those 7 years, you only remember calling your grandmother a single time.
That's right. With the time zone differences, it was always hard to get a hold of her, and she never sent me any forwarding addresses on the letters she would write.
But just to be clear, you remember only calling her, only reaching out to her a single time.
Right.
So to the best of your memory, between 2011 and 2018, you spoke once?
Yes, on her birthday.
Now, Ms. Rogers, you mentioned that your grandmother moved from Alabama to Midlands. Do I have that right?
That's right.
You're not actually aware of when that move occurred?
No.
So at the time, your grandmother didn't share that information with you?
No. Like I said, none of her letters ever had her forwarding address, so I don't know.
So your grandmother did not share her address with you?
No.
You don't know if during the moving process she needed your help?
I don't, but like I said, she wrote my letters. I'm sure she would have told me if she did.
And the reason you don't know if she needed help is because you two were not communicating during that time?
No, she was communicating with me, like I said, the letters.
That's right, Ms. Rogers. She was communicating with you through letters, correct?
That's right.
I want to talk to you about one of those letters in particular. You recall that your grandmother wrote you a letter in February of 2018, right?
Right. One of her updates.
You'd recognize that letter if I showed it to you today.
Yeah.
Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to share the screen to show the witness Exhibit 10, which has not been entered into evidence to this point.
Okay, this is constructive then.
Now, Ms. Rogers, this is the letter that your grandmother wrote you on February 1st, 2018, correct?
Yeah. Nana Agatha is how she always signed it.
You recognize it?
Yes,
It's a fair and accurate copy of that letter?
that's right.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves Exhibit 10 into evidence.
Any objection?
Without objection, Your Honor.
So admitted.
Ms. Rogers, can you see Exhibit 10? Just to make sure.
My apologies. I don't actually have my glasses on today, so I can see the exhibit, but I can't see the text clearly.
That's fine. I can read it for you, Ms. Rogers.
Thank you.
Now, I just want to go down to the 4th paragraph. In this letter, your grandmother tells you that you've become family in name only, correct?
That's right.
She tells you that you're treating your grandma as your own personal ATM in the 3rd paragraph, correct?
That's what she wrote.
She says that she doesn't hear from you for months at stretch and doesn't remember the last time you called without asking for money. Is that right?
I guess so.
And at the end of this letter, Miss Rogers, she tells you that she is writing you out of her will.
That's right.
This was February 1st, 2018, correct?
Yes.
Co-counsel, if you could stop the share screen for us. Thank you. So, Ms. Rogers, in February 1st, you're notified that you've been written out of your grandmother's will.
Right.
Now, something happened in June of 2018, isn't that right?
Yes, I finally left a rehabilitation center I'd been in for a while for an eating disorder.
But to be clear, there was something else. Isn't that right, Ms. Rogers?
Objection, vague.
Sustained.
Ms. Rogers, in June 2018, you ran out of money in your trust fund, correct?
That's right.
That trust fund was funding your travels between 2011 and 2018.
Yes, and the odd jobs I had here and there, like playing my ukulele in the streets.
That trust fund was initially valued at $2 million, correct?
That's what I was told.
And as of June 2018, you had almost no cash.
That's right.
June is the month before July, right?
Yes.
So the month before you visited your grandma, you would finally run out of cash.
Being in the rehabilitation center and not able to work and with how expensive it was, yeah.
But just to be clear, that's the month before you returned to your grandmother.
Yeah. Going back to Nana is what I felt was the right decision for me mentally.
Now, Ms. Rogers, I want to talk to you specifically about your time at Lee Manor, okay?
Yeah, it was short, but incredible.
Now, Ms. Rogers, on direct examination, you mentioned a pill called chlorambutamine, right?
That's right.
Just to be clear, you know that's a heartburn medication?
I've since learned, since 2018, that's what it supposedly does.
Just to be clear, before your grandmother's death, you knew that she was allergic to that pill.
Yeah, Drew actually told me.
But you knew that your grandmother was allergic to the pill.
Everyone in the house knew.
You knew that she could die from even one pill.
That's what Drew told me.
Now, Ms. Rogers, lastly, I want to talk to you about your time in law school, okay?
Sure.
You'd agree with me, like you mentioned on direct examination, that you struggled a little bit during that time.
Objection, relevance.
What's the relevance?
Your Honor, at the end of this line of questioning, the witness is going to testify that she exceeded in one particular class, a class pertaining to law on estates and wills, during which she learned about the Slayer Rule, the law under which she is suing the defendant today.
Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway, but let's tie that up.
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Rogers, you excelled in one class during your law school time, correct?
Yes, wills and estates. I had a professor unlike any other.
And during that time, you also learned about the Slayer rule, correct?
Yes, that's part of the course material. All law students learn about it.
You know that the Slayer rule would prohibit someone from receiving the assets within a will if they're found to have caused the decedent's death.
Yeah, I think that's common knowledge. A recent movie even talked about it.
So, Miss Rogers, in this case, the decedent would be your grandmother, correct?
That's right.
The beneficiary, according to her last will, would be Miss Mars.
That's correct.
The only way you could get or receive money from her will is if a court found Miss Mars responsible for your grandmother's death.
I don't know that. That's the only way.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Plaintiff, do you have any other evidence?
At your time, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests our case in chief and requests a brief recess.
Okay. It is 12:46, and so we're a little under an hour and 15 minutes from all loss. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, but I'll just give you that caution. And just a reminder to our scoring judges and competitors that we are live streaming on YouTube, even during the break. I'll see you in 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I think we have all the competitors back, but I'll let our bailiff tell me that. Okay, it looks like everyone's back in the room. So we're gonna get going. Defense, you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we call Ms. Cabrera to the stand.
Okay, hang on. Actually, let's hang on 1 second. Let me just confirm that our. Can we have all of our scoring judges just confirm that they're here? Either, I guess, by indicating it in the chat or telling me now via audio.
I'm here.
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm back.
I think we've got everyone. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, it looks like everyone is here. So, unless our bailiff tells me otherwise, we'll get going. Hang on 1 second.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Defense, now you may call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Ms. Cabrera to the stand.
Okay, Ms. Cabrera.
May I proceed?
Yes, and before you proceed, I'll just remind our scoring judges that if you're not back on gallery view, you should switch to that function in the top right of your screen. Go ahead, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Cabrera. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hi, my name is Rhianne Cabrera.
And Ms. Cabrera, what do you do for a living?
I'm a writer, biographies mostly about famous writers. It's kind of meta. I've written about Bram Stoker, Mary Shelley. For a lighter project recently, I did Sylvia Plath.
In your career, did you ever write about the author Agatha Lee?
Yeah, I was working on a bio about her, so I shot her an email to meet up. It turns out she's more of a hermit than I am because it took her 3 years to respond. But she told me she was in Midlands, so I moved like the next day.
Okay.
I didn't have much going on, so.
And to be clear, when did you move to Midlands?
That was February 2018.
So, Ms. Cabrera, can you describe your initial relationship with Agatha Lee?
Yeah, we met like every week. She was fine. We did stuff together, like talk or eat, play with my Ouija board. We went on a walk once.
So, to be clear, were you friendly with Miss Lee during that time?
Yeah, I guess you could say we were friends.
And during those initial meetings, was anybody else present at the house?
Yeah, Drew Mars lived there. Mars was Agatha's caretaker because she was old. Agatha had her as a caretaker for, I think,
Ms. Cabrera,
I think our witness froze. I think I'm not the only one who sees that.
okay.
Let's just hold for a second and see if it sorts itself out.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, cool.
We didn't hear anything you said, so why don't you re-ask your question?
Okay, yeah, what was the question?
So during your initial meetings, Ms. Cabrera, was anybody else present at the house?
Right, Drew Mars, the caretaker, because Agatha was old, so Drew took care of her. It had been going on for like 10 years.
Right. And what, if anything, did you observe about the relationship between Miss Mars and Miss Lee?
They seemed super close. Like, I don't really do emotions, but this is based on some mushy gushy next level affection stuff. Because these are the kind of people who in 2018 would exchange Hallmark cards. Like, not even for their birthdays, just because they felt like it.
I see. Now, moving on, Ms. Cabrera, during your conversations with Miss Lee, did you ever talk about her wills?
Yeah, she showed me her wills over the years. Kind of morbid, but also kind of my thing. There was the 2008 one when she'd left everything to Stevie, and then when she 180'd and in 2018 left everything to Drew. She said, Drew is more than a caretaker. Drew is family. Drew is not family, to be clear, but whatever.
And would you recognize those wills if they were shown to you today in court?
Yeah.
Mr. Alexander, if you could please pull up exhibits 8 and 9. Ms. Cabrera, do you recognize these documents?
Yeah, these are Agatha's wills, the ones I mentioned.
I see. And what, if anything, do you observe that's different between these two wills?
Right, so like I said, the first one left everything to Stevie, but then by the second time, 2018, Agatha left her entire estate to her devoted and beloved caretaker, Drew Mars.
I see. And just to be clear, do you know who Stevie Rogers is?
Yeah, the grandkid, Agatha's grandkid.
I see. Mr. Alexander, you can stop the display. Ms. Cabrera, when did you first meet Miss Rogers?
That was July 6th, 2018. She was having tea at Agatha's, so when I walked in, I was kicked out because apparently family is more important than work.
I see. And after that meeting, when was the next time that you saw Ms. Lee?
That would have been 2 days later. We got lunch. She seemed happy that Stevie was home because she would not shut up about him. She even said that Stevie had obviously just ran out of money, but she didn't care. Unconditional love can make people really stupid.
I see. Now, Ms. Cabrera, during that time, did you notice anything? Did you notice anything about Miss Mars's behavior?
Mars.
Objection, Your Honor. As to lack of foundation, the way the opposing counsel's question was phrased suggests that Drew Mars was present in this conversation about Stevie Rogers between the witness and Agatha Lee. I just ask opposing counsel to lay that foundation that Drew Mars was there for that.
Your Honor, I can rephrase the question.
I thought the question was, what did you notice about Drew Mars? Am I right? Something along those lines?
I believe I said around that time.
All right. Why don't you rephrase the question, and to the extent that you think it's objectionable as rephrased, you can object. I'm not sure that we all are on the same page as to what the question actually was. So go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Ms. Cabrera, around the time after you met Miss Rogers, did you notice anything about Miss Mars's behavior?
Yeah, so Drew kept complaining about Stevie, said she was giving her bad vibes, thought she was only there for the money. She did not seem to trust him, but I stayed out of the drama. I mean, I was just there to write a bio, so.
Now, Ms. Cabrera, I'd like to move now to the events of August 2018. When was the last time that you saw Miss Lee alive?
That would have been August 14th, 2018. We'd gotten lunch that day, and I do remember that Agatha was kind of upset about something.
I see. Now, we've heard some talk about the events of that morning. Did Agatha mention anything about this to you?
I think our witness is frozen again.
Yes.
All right, let's do the same thing.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, she's back.
Sorry, I missed the question.
Of course, I will re-ask. So we've heard talk about what happened that morning. Did Agatha mention any of that to you?
The morning of August 14th, I mean, I just had lunch with her. She talked about how she wanted Stevie to forgive her. She hoped she made the right decision.
Did you ask her about what that decision was?
Right. I asked her, what exactly did Stevie ask for? But she just changed the subject to opera.
So, Miss Cabrera, did you ever find out what Ms. Rogers was asking for?
No, because Agatha died later that day. Drew was crying super hard on the phone when she told me. So I was like, there. But she said, don't be sarcastic. But I mean, I wasn't. I actually did like Agatha.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Ms. Cabrera. As a writer yourself, you first came into contact with Miss Lee in 2018, right?
Yeah, to write a bio.
You arrived at Lee Manor in February of 2018.
Yeah.
And you met with Agatha Lee over a period of several months.
Yeah, we met every week. That was enough social interaction for me for the week.
And usually you met in her study, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you'd go out to lunch too, right?
Yeah, her treat.
I want to ask you about one time that you went out to lunch with Miss Agatha Lee. That was a Tuesday on August 14th. Do you remember that day, Miss Cabrera?
I talked about that just now, yeah.
Well, after that meal, you tried to schedule your next meeting with Miss Lee, didn't you?
Yeah, I was feeling spicy that week, so I was like, let's hang out again.
In fact, you suggested that your next meeting would be that Friday, August 17th, right?
Yeah, she mentioned that.
But Agatha said she was busy, didn't she?
Yeah, it's okay. I'm used to rejection.
In fact, Agatha told you she had a meeting with her lawyer that she couldn't miss, right?
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. We're offering this statement as it was a then existing plan, rather that Agatha had this appointment on her calendar that she planned to meet with her lawyer on August 17th, 2018.
Response to that?
Yeah, Your Honor, I believe that there is truth value beyond simply Agatha's plan that meeting that the scheduling of that meeting had occurred.
I thought the statement was I'm going to meet with my lawyer later today. I mean, I'm not saying it exactly as the witness said it, but something along those lines. Right?
That is my understanding.
Okay. For the same reasons as earlier, I'm going to allow it under the 8033 exception. Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, Ms. Cabrera, Agatha told you she couldn't meet for lunch on Friday because she was meeting with her lawyer, right?
That's what she said.
And you knew about this appointment with her lawyer because she told you.
Yes.
And less than 24 hours after learning about this appointment with her lawyer, you learn that Agatha Lee is dead, don't you?
Yeah.
And to your knowledge, Agatha never meets with her lawyer, does she?
No, because she was dead.
Now, I want to direct your attention to August 20th. That was the reading of Agatha Lee's will, right?
Yeah, I was there for that.
You learned the value of Agatha Lee's assets, didn't you?
Yeah.
And to your knowledge, Drew Mars already knew that Agatha had included her in the will, right?
Yeah, because I do remember Agatha mentioning that.
Well, also, Drew Mars told you in April of 2018 that she was the sole inheritor, right?
Yeah.
So you would agree with me that when Agatha Lee died, Drew Mars knew she would be receiving every penny, right?
I guess according to that April conversation.
But in that room, when Agatha Lee's will was read, Drew Mars acted shocked, didn't she?
She was shocked. Yeah, I mean, she was crying also.
She said, "I can't believe it. I had no idea," right?
She said that.
But you knew she was lying to everyone in that room, didn't you?
I think she was in shock.
You knew the statements that Drew Mars were making in that room during the reading of the will were false, right?
Yeah, it was an emotional time for, I think, everyone there.
And when Miss Mars was making false statements, the police were also in that room, weren't they?
Yeah, they were.
Now, after that day, you didn't talk to Drew Mars for almost 2 years, right?
Yeah, I don't really talk to anyone much.
Well, then in June of 2020, Drew Mars reaches out to you, doesn't she?
Yes, we talked on a cellular phone.
Yeah, she asks you 2 questions on that cell phone call, right?
Well, she was like, "How are you?" And I was like, "Not happy," because I never am. And she was like, "Why?" And she asked a lot of questions.
One question she asked Miss Cabrera was if you would testify on her behalf in court, right?
Yeah, that's how I ended up here.
And then another question she asked was if you'd like to have Miss Lee's private book collection, right?
Yeah.
As an author, you know that Miss Lee's book collection is worth several $1 million, isn't it?
Probably.
In fact, those books, they're priceless to you, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm glad I meant so much to Agatha. I thought we were friends.
So after Drew Mars offers you those books, you come to court today, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, who else would she give those books to? Stevie's the law school dropout. I'm the author, so.
In fact, Drew Mars told you point blank, if the civil trial ends and I am still in possession of Agatha's estate, those books are yours.
Yeah.
You still haven't received that collection, have you?
No, instead I'm pursuing this rare Shirley Jackson typewriter.
And if Miss Lee is guilty today, you don't get that priceless book collection, do you?
I guess not.
In fact, the only person in court today to promise you that book collection was the defendant, Drew Mars.
Yeah.
Nothing further.
Redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor.
Okay.
Now, Ms. Cabrera, opposing counsel just mentioned Agatha's book collection. If you came into possession of that collection, would you sell those books?
No, they're really special to Agatha. She said she never wanted them to be published, so I'd read them for my curiosity, but then probably burn them to honor her wishes.
I see. And to be clear, do you have any intention of making money off of those books?
No, I'm good. I write Tumblr fan fiction that sells for a pretty penny.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera. No further questions, Your Honor.
Recross on that?
Briefly, Your Honor.
Okay.
Ms. Cabrera, you would agree that those books are valuable to you, right?
Yeah, because Agatha and I are friends. We're friends.
You would agree that you want those books, don't you?
Sorry, what? She didn't want the books?
You would agree with me that you want Agatha Lee's book collection, right?
Right, to make sure they're not going to go public, because that's not what Agatha wanted.
And the only person to promise you those books was Drew Mars on the same phone call where she asked you to testify today, right?
Yeah.
Nothing further.
Okay. Defense, do you have any other witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Drew Mars.
Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself?
Of course. My name is Drew Mars.
Ms. Mars, why are you here today?
I'm here because the woman I worked for a decade passed away, and her grandson, Stevie Rogers, is trying to frame me for killing her.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation, lack of personal knowledge.
Sustained.
Ms. Mars, we've heard a lot today about what the plaintiff is accusing you of, and I want to give you an opportunity to respond right away. Did you kill Agatha Lee?
Of course not. I loved Agatha. I never would have hurt her.
Can you tell us about your relationship with her?
Sure. I was Agatha's caretaker starting in 2008. She was my boss, but really she was so much more than that. She was my friend, my mentor. Honestly, she felt like a grandmother to me.
Do you know Stevie Rogers?
Must be
Yes.
something.
Stevie is,
Sorry, you were frozen for a second. You can continue.
thank you. Stevie is Agatha's granddaughter. I met her back in 2008, but after that, she was away for a long time.
Just based on what you observed, what was Agatha's relationship like with Stevie?
I mean, it was mostly non-existent for the time that I knew Agatha. I remember there were nights when Agatha would cry over the letters she sent Stevie that she never got a response to. I tried to help comfort her, to show her that she still had people in her life who loved her, who cared about her, people like me.
You mentioned a moment ago that you met Stevie for the first time in 2018. What was that meeting like?
Right. When Stevie showed up at our door, I was so hopeful. I never saw Agatha smile quite as bright as when Stevie walked in her room. But I'll be honest, I was skeptical too.
Why?
Because of Agatha's will.
I want to talk to you about that will. What can you tell us about it?
Sure. Well, Agatha's most recent will, written in February 2018, left her entire estate to me.
What did being named the beneficiary of Agatha's will mean to you?
When I first found out, I was shocked. I honestly felt undeserving. But to me, it was such a strong gesture of Agatha's love for me. I'd always felt that Agatha was like my
Yes,
family.
Your Honor. Speculation as to why Miss Lee included her in the will.
Response?
Your Honor, the witness was testifying as to her feelings about being named Agatha's beneficiary. She isn't speculating as to Agatha's state of mind and only testifying to how she felt in that moment.
Response to that?
Yes, Your Honor. This witness testified that she was included in that will because of Agatha's strong love for her. That's speculating into Miss Lee's mindset.
I'm going to sustain the objection and strike the testimony as to what this witness thought Miss Lee was thinking or feeling. So sustained.
Ms. Mars, can you tell us just how being named the beneficiary affected you?
Of course. I've always loved Agatha so much and felt like she was my family, so I hoped maybe this meant she might feel the same.
Do you know who would have received her estate in the event of her death prior to 2018?
Yes, prior to the 2018 will, everything that Miss Lee had would have gone to her granddaughter, Stevie.
When in 2018 did Stevie come to visit?
It was July.
How many months had gone by in between this change in the will and Stevie's arrival?
Just 5 months, I guess.
Just based on your knowledge, was Stevie aware of this change?
I can't be positive, but I know Agatha was still writing Stevie letters at that time, so it's certainly possible.
All right, now, Ms. Mars, I want to return to something you said before. You said that you were skeptical of Stevie upon her return. Can you tell us what you meant by that?
Well, at first it was something that Agatha said, actually, that caused me to keep my guard up from then on, to really pay attention to what Stevie was up to at Lee Manor.
What did Agatha say?
Agatha said that Stevie had just run out of money.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, we're not eliciting that statement for the truth of the matter asserted. That fact has been elicited through previous testimony. Rather, what we're using it for is to show the subsequent action of this witness.
May
So
I
this
respond?
before I let you respond, so you're saying that this witness hears that Ms. Rogers ran out of money and then does something. What can you make an offer of proof as to what she does as a result?
Yes, Your Honor. She became much more. She started watching more closely Mrs. Rogers' behavior, just to make sure that she was protecting the interest of Miss Lee as best she could.
Response to that?
Yes, Your Honor. I have a good faith belief that they are using this for the truth of the matter asserted, that Miss Rogers ran out of money. In fact, when Miss Rogers was asked about it, she said she had almost no cash. She didn't say that she had entirely no cash. So there's truth value there. And it's not an effect on the listener that she paid attention to Miss Rogers. She can just simply testify to what she saw Miss Rogers doing without eliciting this statement.
Okay. I do think you're offering the statement for the truth, but I understand your argument that it could be offered for the effect on the listener. And since Miss Rogers already testified that she was running low on cash at the time she moved, I don't think there's really any dispute that happened. And so I'm going to allow the statement in, allow this witness to testify to what her subsequent actions or increased observations were at that time as a result of hearing this. And I'm going to give the jury an instruction that they're not to use Miss Lee's statement about Miss Rogers' financial state at that time for the truth, but they can consider other evidence that was elicited to that point. So overruled with that, but I'll give that limiting instruction. Proceed.
Ms. Mars, can you tell us what you did after Agatha told you that?
Sure. Well, after what I heard from Miss Lee, I was a little more cautious. I was really paying attention to what Stevie was saying, and in fact, I heard a conversation between Stevie and Agatha that confirmed my concerns.
What did you hear Stevie say during that conversation?
Well, Stevie asked Agatha about the will.
When did Stevie Rogers ask Miss Lee about her will?
It was on August 14th, the same day that Agatha died.
I want to walk you through that day, August 14th.
Okay.
How did it start?
Well, in the morning, I brought Agatha her cup of tea in the study, but I stopped outside the door because I heard Stevie and Agatha talking, and I didn't want to interrupt. But that was the conversation I was talking about earlier.
And can you say what exactly you heard Stevie Rogers say during that conversation?
Of course. Stevie said, "I know you cut me out of the will, but I really hope that you'll reconsider."
What did Agatha respond?
Well, she refused, and right after I saw Stevie storm out of the room. But it was what Stevie said later that really concerned me.
What did Stevie say later?
Stevie stopped me in the other room, and she told me, "Don't count your millions yet."
I want to talk to you what happened after Miss Rogers told you not to count your millions. What did you do after hearing that conversation?
Well, Agatha and I had a lunch appointment. I dropped Agatha off there and I ran a few errands.
How long were you gone from Lee Manor for?
About 2 hours, between noon and 2 p.m.
Just based on your knowledge, who was at the house at the time of your leaving?
Well, Stevie was the only one there when we left. I don't know if Stevie stayed there the whole time or not, but she's the only other person I saw in the manor all day.
Again, Miss Marsh, just based on what you know, do you know what Stevie was doing while you were gone?
No, I have no idea. She could have been doing anything.
At the point that you left, were any of the doors in the house locked?
Not to my knowledge. I certainly didn't lock any of the doors inside.
Was your room locked?
No, I never locked my room.
So when you returned at 2 p.m., what happened?
I got home and Agatha went up for a nap. And a little later, Stevie and Agatha had dinner together in the study.
When was the next time you saw Agatha after her dinner?
After her dinner that night, I went up to bed, and the next time I saw her was at 8:30 the next day. That's when I found her dead.
Miss Marge, do you know how she died?
Yes, they did a toxicology report. Found she died from an allergic reaction to chloroandramine.
Just to be sure, Miss Marge, did you say that she died related to something called chloroandramine?
Yes, sorry, in case you didn't hear me, the toxicology report said she died from an allergic reaction to chloroandramine.
Are there any drugs that appear similar to chloroandramine?
Yes, actually. A drug called Winterin looks and tastes exactly like chloroandramine.
Do you know if anybody else knew about Agatha Lee's allergy to chloroandramine?
I do. It was so strange. Stevie, actually, earlier in her stay, asked me about chloroandramine, and I told her that Agatha had a deathly allergy to chloroandramine. Even one pill could kill her.
Thank you, Miss Marsh. No further questions, Your Honor.
Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Miss Mars, let's talk about your relationship with Miss Lee. Now, you worked for her since 2008,
That's right.
sole caretaker since 2009.
Yes, that's right.
You prepared her medication,
Among other things, yeah.
checked on her health.
Yes, I did routine health checks.
Really, you did whatever Miss Lee needed you to do, right?
Exactly.
And like you testified to, you grew so close she was like a grandmother.
That's how I felt. Yes. We spent all of our time together.
You grew so close, she included you into her will.
That's right. Like I said, she changed her will in 2018 to make me the beneficiary.
Let's talk about that will. Now, she changed it in 2018, February that month, right?
Exactly, yes.
And it was your understanding that when she died, you would inherit everything.
That's what the will said in 2018. I was blown away.
Now, after Miss Lee died, you tried to hide the fact that you knew about this will.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. I didn't hide anything.
You pretended like you never knew about this will. Yes or no?
I did know about the will.
Right. And you were present at the reading of the will.
That's right. They read out the will and said that I would be inheriting everything, and I was in awe. I was shocked. I never expected to have this much money in my life.
And Miss Mars, you pretended like you never knew about that will. Yes or no?
Right, I said I was shocked.
You lied about not knowing about that will.
I said that I was so shocked to be inheriting all this money.
Miss Mars, yes or no? You lied.
I think there was an objection, so let me just stop you.
There was, Your Honor, but I was muted. At this point, it's untimely, so I'll withdraw it.
Okay.
Miss Mars, yes or no? You lied.
I said that I was shocked. Yes.
And to be clear, before Miss Lee had died, you believed she was worth over $20 million, right?
Something like that.
So let's talk about your financial situation. Now, you'd send most of your money back home to your family, right?
That's true. Agatha paid me a generous salary, so I was able to help support my family.
Your family needed that money.
Of course, yeah. My sister actually was really sick for a long time, for most of our childhood up until adulthood. So any money I could give definitely helped.
Right. And you're worried that your sister might die before Miss Lee, right?
Well, I was always worried that my sister might die. She was very sick, but she's still here today. She's a fighter.
Specifically, you worried that she might die before Miss Lee, right?
Right, I was always worried she could pass away.
But to be clear, with $20 million, you and your family would never have to worry about money again.
Well, of course, $20 million is more money than I've ever imagined having.
So let's talk about August 14th. Now, you overheard a conversation between Miss Rogers and Miss Lee.
Yes, that morning.
It took place in the study.
Right. I was running when I heard voices, so I was outside. I didn't want to interrupt.
I'm sorry, Miss Marge, it cut out. Was that a yes? That conversation took place in the study?
Yes, yes.
And afterwards, you drove Miss Lee off to lunch.
Right. She had an appointment with Miss Cabrera.
And on your way to lunch, you saw Miss Lee make a phone call, right?
Right. She called her lawyer. She was going to meet with her lawyer later that week.
So to be clear, you believe she was meeting with her personal attorney later that week, right?
Yes, they had a standing appointment.
And after that phone call and dropping Miss Lee off to lunch, you went to the pharmacy.
That's right. I had a few toiletries I needed to pick up for myself and for Miss Lee.
You went alone.
Right. I figured I would go while Agatha was at lunch.
You paid cash.
I did.
So, Miss Mars, let's talk about chloroandrine. You know it's an over-the-counter medication.
Yes, it's an over-counter medication for heartburn.
And like you testified to, you also knew that Miss Lee took Winterin pills, right?
Right. Like someone said earlier in the trial, I would set up Miss Lee's pill box every week. Winterin was one of the pills in there that she would take.
And Winterin, it looks exactly like chloroandrine, right?
Exactly.
It feels the same?
Yes, they look exactly the same. That's why I was always so careful.
Smells the same?
They're almost identical.
It even looks, or it even tastes exactly the same, right?
That's exactly right.
But from the very first day that you started working for Miss Lee, you knew she was definitely allergic to chloroandrine. Right?
Exactly. I had known that for 10 years.
Now, you also knew the last time she took chloroandrine, she had a heart attack.
Yes. Her previous caretaker informed me of that.
And you also knew that if she ingested chloroandrine again, it'd likely be fatal, right?
Exactly. And that's what I told Stevie too, but now I wish I hadn't.
Miss Mars, I'm not asking what you told anyone else. I'm just asking what you knew. And you knew if she ingested chloroandrine, it would be fatal, right?
Exactly.
All right. Now, after the pharmacy, you picked Miss Lee up and you went home, right?
Right. I picked her up from lunch.
And that night, Miss Lee died.
I found her body the next morning.
Miss Mars, you know she died from chloroandrine.
That's right. The minute we found her, Stevie told me we needed to do a toxicology report. She was adamant we had to do one, and now I'm glad we did. That's how we found out what happened.
I wasn't asking what Stevie said. I just asked that you knew she died from chloroandrine. Yes or no?
Yes, that's right. I found out from the toxicology report.
And like you testified to every week, you were the one that prepared her medication.
Right. I prepared her medication, in fact, that previous Saturday. It was a Tuesday when she passed away.
And Miss Mars, on August 14th, you had access to her medication.
Right, but like I said, I put together her medication every Saturday. So I'd set up all of her pills for her a few days before.
On the day she died, you had access to her medication. Yes or no?
Sure, everyone did. The pill box was out on the counter.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Direct?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Defense, do you have any other witnesses or evidence?
Your Honor, we do not.
Okay. unless our bailiff tells me otherwise, I think we're going to go right ahead in the closing arguments. We've got under 30 minutes until all lost, so I think that's appropriate. Are the parties comfortable with that?
Plaintiff is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Defense is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
All right, and I'm being told that our local rules say that we can't have a break, so even if you wanted one, we're going to go ahead. Plaintiff, whenever you're ready to go.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, I just want to inquire a procedural question. Is there a rebuttal today?
I'm being told by our bailiff that yes, the local rules permit a rebuttal.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Great. And let me just remind our scoring judges to switch back into speaker view now, because we're going to hear closing arguments. So whenever you're ready.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. A window of opportunity with a $20 million reward. Members of the jury, if I told you that in 6 months' time, you would receive $20 million, imagine how you would feel. No credit card debt, no loans, all your bills paid off. Your family would never have to worry about money again. In fact, every day you'd wake up knowing that one day that $20 million is coming. But then one day, something changes. One day, you find out that that $20 million windfall is about to expire. You see, that is exactly how the defendant felt when she stood outside the study on July 14th, 2018. You see, all 4 witnesses before you today told you about that conversation. All 4 witnesses told you that that conversation discussed putting Stevie Rogers back in Agatha Lee's estate. You see, all 4 witnesses told you that after that conversation with Stevie Rogers, where she agreed to add Stevie to the estate, Agatha Lee made an appointment with her lawyer that Friday. The only person that told you that Agatha Lee said no was the defendant. But you see, standing outside the door, the defendant had a narrowing window of opportunity to hold on to that money. So the defendant, she acted fast. Within hours, Drew Mars lethally poisons Agatha Lee, and Agatha never gets the chance to amend her will. That's why we're here today. We brought this suit against Drew Mars to do what's right, to prevent the person who put Agatha Lee in a grave from putting $20 million in her pocket. You see, in the state of Midlands, if you killed somebody and you meant to do it, you're forbidden to inherit anything from their estate. And today, we, the plaintiff, have the burden to prove to you that the defendant purposefully caused the death of Agatha Lee. So what does that word mean, members of the jury? Purposefully. You see, if you're asking yourself, the defendant, she knew what she was doing. The defendant, she knew the result of her actions. The defendant had an intent. She was acting purposefully. We had to prove this purposeful cause of death by a preponderance of the evidence, which simply means that it's more likely than not that Drew Mars is the one responsible for the death of Agatha Lee. And so we called 2 witnesses to meet that burden. You heard first from Detective Bond, and later from Stevie Rogers. Now, Mr. Marcus Bond is a lifelong detective. He's a private investigator, and he walked us through the steps of the investigation, the collection of evidence, and how everything pointed to Drew Mars. He told us about the toxicology report results, where we learned that Agatha Lee had died from a drug called chloroandramine. We also learned during Mr. Bond's direct examination about an email. You see, the defendant knew. She expected that $20 million windfall. Agatha showed me a will that is dated today saying, Stevie, the no good grandkid, is out and I get everything. The house, the money, everything. We're talking millions of dollars. This is going to totally change my life. The words of the defendant. Then we heard from Miss Rogers herself, who had just finally gotten her life under control, who had just left an expensive rehabilitation center, who was just trying to find her roots back home and be with her grandmother on the 10th anniversary of her parents' death. We also learned from Miss Rogers that her and her grandmother grew closer and closer. We also learned who had access to the pill case at Lee Manor. And you see, the defense, they've gotten before you and they told you a story, and that's their job. Their job is to tell you a story. But recall during opening statements that they asked you to keep in mind the inconsistencies in the story. So let's talk about those inconsistencies. Let's talk about the time that the defendant, during the reading of the will, lied to the police officers, to Miss Rogers, to Mr. Cabrera in that room. She said, I had no idea. She lied. She lied that day and she's lying today. You see, given the evidence, we know what happened at Lee Manor on July 14th. You know, because the facts and the evidence are clear. On July 14th, after weeks of improving their relationship, Miss Rogers and Miss Lee sit down and make a plan to include Stevie Rogers on that will. There's an appointment that Friday. The defendant's window of opportunity then is set. She overhears that conversation and she has to either end Agatha's life or lose $20 million. She mouths the words, no way. That day, the defendant drives and she gets those pills from a pharmacy. That night, she walks upstairs. She hides that chloroandramine in her fist. She slips them into Agatha Lee's pill case. Minutes later, Miss Lee takes those pills thinking they are her prescription, not knowing the person she paid to protect her wanted a profit. And so, Agatha Lee died. Miss Agatha Lee was a brilliant woman. She was an author, a philanthropist, a gardener, a kind soul, but she died from an allergic reaction, a violent one. And we owe it to her to get this right. Because the person that was meant to protect my client's grandmother is now trying to profit off of her death. That's why we're asking you to find Drew Mars liable for purposely causing the death of my client's grandmother, Miss Agatha Lee.
Okay, defense, do you wish to make a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, whenever you're ready.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Stevie Rogers framed Miss Mars to steal the fortune. Now, members of the jury, I want you to remember at the center of this case is Miss Agatha Lee's estate. Mr. Alexander, please pull up Exhibit 5. Your Honor, this has already been entered into evidence as per the stipulations. Plaintiff counsel has argued, and we agree that this Agatha Lee's death was not the result of a personal stake against her. No, it was for this estate, this beautiful house, almost $20 million in liquid assets, and almost $3 million in book royalties on top of that. Stevie Rogers framed Miss Mars to steal this fortune. Now, at the start of trial, my co-counsel, Mr. Alexander, explained to you the burden that the plaintiff bears in this case. Because let's be clear, the plaintiff and only the plaintiff bears that burden. We had no obligation to call any witnesses or show any evidence. It was the plaintiff's duty to show you beyond a preponderance of the evidence, that means more likely than not, that Miss Mars knowingly caused or intentionally caused Agatha Lee's death. Now, in a few minutes, you're going to be going back to deliberate on this case in order to return a verdict. And you're going to be given a set of jury instructions that are going to explain how to do that. And I want you to pay attention to that burden, because if you do not believe that it is more likely than not that Miss Mars caused Agatha Lee's death, then you must rule in favor of Miss Mars, and you must give her access to the inheritance that she deserves. Now, opposing counsel just got up here and he talked about a closing window of opportunity, how Miss Mars had a now or never situation to end Miss Lee's life. And members of the jury, I want you to think about whether that makes any sense. Mr. Alexander, if you could please pull up Exhibit 10. Your Honor, this has already been put into evidence. Because when Agatha Lee cuts someone out of her estate, we know how she does it. We have the evidence here that when she does that, she makes it clear to whoever's being cut. We've become family in name only. Drew has been with me for more than a decade, stayed with me through thick and thin, and turned down several offers that would have paid far more money than I do. Members of the jury, are we really to believe that Miss Lee was compassionate enough to put her grandkid back into the will after a month, but was cruel enough to cut her caretaker out of the will without even warning her? Not a letter like this, not even a conversation in that car that afternoon. Members of the jury, that does not make sense. The plaintiff's version of that conversation, as Miss Rogers put it, and as Mr. Bond heard from Miss Rogers, well, that just doesn't make sense. What makes sense is the truth, as Miss Mars told you, and as Miss Cabrera corroborated. When Stevie Rogers asked for that inheritance, Miss Lee told her in no uncertain terms, no. It was Drew's inheritance and her inheritance only. But even if that conversation didn't happen, well, perhaps you're thinking that, well, perhaps that inheritance could still be a motive to attain that inheritance faster. But members of the jury, Miss Mars was already being paid a generous nurse's salary, as she told you on the stand. In fact, Agatha Lee herself said that Miss Mars turned down other more lucrative offers. Are we really willing to believe that Miss Mars would throw away that salary, risk losing that inheritance, risk being convicted of murder, not even to secure this inheritance, but just to make it come a little faster? Well, that doesn't make sense either. The fact of the matter is, no matter which way you cut it, Miss Mars does not have a motive here. But there was someone else at that manor who had a motive. Mr. Alexander, if you could please pull up the Slayer statute. Now, Miss Rogers had, in 2018, had $12,000 to her name, and she spent $10,000 of that just trying to find her own grandmother's address. And when she asked for that inheritance back, she got rejected. But she realized that there was another way to get that inheritance. If a court believed, by a preponderance of the evidence, that Miss Mars caused Agatha Lee's death, then Miss Mars would get nothing. And Miss Rogers would get everything. The house, the money, the royalties. Stevie Rogers framed Miss Mars to steal the estate. She had the means, she had the motive, she had the opportunity. Between noon and 1:30 p.m. on August 14th, not a single witness besides Miss Rogers herself could tell you where she was, in her bedroom. And at any of the 15 drugstores in Ryder County, Miss Rogers could obtain the means. Chloroandramine, the pill that ended Miss Lee's life, that she knew would be a death sentence. 90 minutes was more than enough time to buy that drug, go into Miss Lee's bedroom, switch out those pills, and then all she had to do was wait. Now, Mr. Bond brought up, when he took the stand, he brought up a pill bottle that was found in the defendant's closet. But I want you to truly think about how it got there. Because that search of Lee Manor, where they found that pill, that occurred almost a week after Miss Lee's death. So I need you to ask yourselves, if Miss Mars knew about that pill bottle, why did she not get rid of it in that time? Well, the answer is simple. Because she didn't know it was there. Because she didn't put it there. Yet you'll notice that they could not find a single fingerprint belonging to the defendant on that pill bottle. Now, while we're talking about Mr. Bond, I want you to think about whether or not, about just how qualified he was. Because let's be clear here, he was not a detective, not a toxicologist, and he was not a medical examiner. So why, of all the people in this case, did they choose to call the one person who's being paid by the plaintiff? Well, it wasn't because he did a thorough investigation. We found on cross that he didn't investigate the financial motives of his two suspects in a case about a financial motive. It wasn't because he followed proper procedure. When he walked into the defendant's room without her permission to get that email, he didn't give it to the police. No, he sat on it for 6 days. So again, why did they call him? Well, it's the same reason that Miss Rogers called for an autopsy and a tox screen before she had any reason to believe that there was foul play. It's because Miss Rogers knew exactly what Mr. Bond would find. And she just needed someone to say it loudly. Now, members of the jury, when you go back to deliberate on this case, I want you to consider all the facts that you have heard today. And remember that it is your duty to determine what weight you need to assign that evidence. You do not need to believe evidence that doesn't make sense. You do not need to believe evidence that is an obvious lie. And you do not need to believe evidence that is the result of a frame job. And that is why I ask you to return the only verdict that is consistent with the true facts of today's case. That you rule in favor of Miss Mars. Stevie Rogers framed Miss Mars to steal the fortune. Do not let her get away with that. Thank you.
All right. I think that concludes our trial. Actually, no, we have rebuttal. I take it back.
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Now, we agree that on August 14th, 2018, two parties needed money, but only one person lied to the police. Only one person had access to Agatha Lee's pill bottle. Only one person knew where to buy chloroandramine. Only one person went to the pharmacy. There was only one person with a window of opportunity to kill Agatha Lee, and that was Drew Mars. That's why we're asking you to find Miss Mars liable for the wrongful death of Agatha Lee.